A few years ago, in fact, I know exactly when it was because it was the day that the very first iPhone came out. And the reason I remember that is because of the nature of the conversation that I'm going to share with you. I was at a mall there in Chandler, and so as I walked up on one of these kiosks, out there in the middle of the mall, and this guy's selling sunglasses, and I walked up there, and we just engaged in a conversation, and eventually this guy says, he goes, "Well, man, I hope you're not going down to the Apple store." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he goes, "Oh my gosh, the line is a mile long." And I didn't, I said, "Well, why is that?" And he goes, "Well, the iPhone just came out." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right." And he's telling me, he's excited, man, because at that time it was the latest, greatest, And he's giving me all these details about it. It'll do this, it'll do that. And I remember, as he's explaining it to me, I remember thinking to myself, hey, this is a great opportunity. I'll use this as an illustration. Get him thinking, So I said, "Can I ask you a question?" He's like, "Well, sure." And I said, "Well, suppose you and I were walking along the beach, and we're walking along, and we look down there, laying in the sand is an iPhone." We look at each other, "What's up with that?" And you go, "Well, I wonder how that got there." And what if I told you, "Well, I know how it got there"? What if I told you the following story? What if I said, out there in the ocean, millions of years ago, in the bottom of the ocean, next to these hydrothermal vents, down there in the bottom of the ocean, sand and sediment was just tumbling around, all by itself, becoming more organized and more organized and more organized over millions of years. And then one day that iPhone washed up on the beach. I said, "If I told you a story like that, would you believe that?" And he starts laughing. He's like, "Man, that's crazy. Nobody would believe something like that." And I go, "I know, nobody would believe something like that. And here's why I ask. Because I said, I'm right there with you. Nobody would ever believe a story like that about the iPhone. And yet almost everyone I know, at least who is an atheist, they believe that that's how we got here." And I said, "I don't understand that. Because as you said, nobody would ever believe a story like that about an iPhone, and yet one cell in your body is infinitely more complex than an iPhone." And something, in Darwin's day, they didn't know that. They were just ignorant about the cell. They didn't know. In fact, everybody in Darwin's day, they thought that a cell was basically just a little bubble with gelatin in it. And we now know, oh my goodness, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, we're going to show you a video clip, and you're going to see just a very small sampling of some of the molecular machines that you'll find within a single cell. Let's take a look at this. Let me ask you a question. I want you to think about your laptop, your computer. The question is this: how important is an operating system to your laptop? Pretty important. Pretty important. I mean, what would you have without an operating system? This gentleman's like, "Well, you would have a very expensive paperweight, right? Very expensive paperweight. That's what you got, because it would be worthless. You got to have an operating system." Why do I mention that? Because in every cell, you have this incredible operating system called DNA, except it is far more complex than anything we've ever created. In fact, don't take my word for it. You heard of Bill Gates? Bill Gates of Microsoft. He is maybe an atheist, at least an agnostic. He says going to church is a waste of time. He actually said that once. He said he thinks that God is just make-believe. But listen, out of his own words, listen out of a book that he wrote in 1995 called The Road Ahead. Listen to this quote by Bill Gates, where he says the following: "DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software we've ever created." Romans 1:20 says he knows. Romans 1:20 says he has no excuse. He knows. My granddaughter loves playing with Legos, and my son bought for her this Lego kit. It was like this shark. You just build this shark, and it's great. She loves sharks. So anyway, she knows. So my granddaughter knows when she lays out all those little tiny Lego pieces on the table, she intuitively knows that it's not going to organize itself by itself, right? She knows that it's going to take a couple of things. It's going to take intelligence and information, using her intelligence, her mind, and information in the form of instructions. It's going to take these two things in order to organize all of those tiny pieces, listen to this, in a very coherent and integrated manner. A few years ago, if you have an interest in robotics, I remember a few years ago I was reading an article about this robot called Atlas. And as I was reading this article, it said Atlas was created by Boston Dynamics. And I remember it said it was created. Well, that word, to me, that word just popped off the page. And when you see the word created, you should highlight it, underline it, put little sparklers around it, because that word clues you in that they know that these things are not going to organize themselves. It wasn't through a process of random chance processes. They also had to apply a lot of intelligence and a lot of information in order to build Atlas. And yet, with all that collective brain power to build this robot, you realize by comparison, it doesn't even compare to the human body. If you get a cut, the skin begins to repair itself, the blood begins to go to work and to coagulate. If you've ever broken a bone or you fractured a bone, the bone begins to knit itself back together. Inside your chest is this absolutely incredible pump called the heart. That heart is going to beat 100,000 times in the next 24 hours. Every minute, it pumps 1.5 gallons of blood through this amazing network of arteries, veins, capillaries. Absolutely amazing. Some of you likely either played a sport or you do play a sport. Maybe you're just a sports fan. I want you to, in your mind, think of that one moment that you will never forget, that one defining moment in that one game, and just get a freeze frame of that for a moment. And I want to take a moment to explain what happens in a split second in the human body just for that athlete to make that one move. The first thing that happens is you have this amazing piece of optical equipment inside the socket, the eye socket. It's called the human eye. It is taking in photons, it's taking in light, and it's taking in all this information, and it's sending it across. It's kind of like a USB cable. It's sending it down the optic nerve into the supercomputer in your brain, the supercomputer called the brain. And I was reading an article just the other day that they said that the brain will make billions of calculations per second. But it doesn't end there. The brain will then send that signal out through the nervous system, through the tissues and the organs of the body, and everything ramps up, right? Your respiratory system ramps up, your metabolism, everything ramps up. And all these things happen just in a fraction of a second. But Romans 1:20 tells us that it's not just the human body that's amazing. It's not just the human body that testifies to God's existence. Romans 1:20 says that everything, from the immensity of the universe down to some of these molecular machines, the information in DNA, everything testifies to God's existence, all of creation. In fact, when you walk out here, next time you walk past one of those trees out there, just stop for a moment and think about the fact that just one leaf, just a single leaf on that tree out there is way more sophisticated than any solar panel we've ever developed. So if it took that much intelligence and information to develop a solar panel, think of the level of intelligence of the one who created that leaf in the first place. Or suppose that maybe you were able to come out to East Mesa and join me for a little tour out at the Boeing plant in East Mesa. And this is where they build the Apache helicopter. And imagine we walk into this big hangar and you see this Apache helicopter sitting there. And even though we were not there to watch them go through the process, when you see it, we intuitively know that all those million whatever pieces did not organize themselves by themselves, right? That it took, again, a tremendous amount of information, a tremendous amount of intelligence to organize all of those into a coherent, integrated system. And yet, think about this, for all of that brain power to create that, it doesn't even compare to a hummingbird. Think about the hummingbird can outmaneuver an Apache helicopter any day. Any day. And if that doesn't impress you, think about this. That hummingbird, you don't even need expensive jet fuel, right? It runs on sugar water. Seriously. That's crazy. It runs on sugar water. And if it still doesn't wake you up, listen to this. Think about this. That hummingbird, it can make another hummingbird. If that doesn't, please, if that doesn't, let me get you a Starbucks or something to wait, because if that doesn't just, oh my gosh, that should just make your head explode. Just the thought of that, it should just make your head explode. Now, before I wrap this up, some of you're still thinking about that kid from the 6th grade and his question, right? That kid, remember the kid that asked, well, where did God come from? Who made God? And you know something? That's not just a question from 6th grade boys. Adults ask this, everybody asks this. In fact, I realized that, you ever heard of the famous atheist Richard Dawkins? In fact, I think he included it in one of his books. He loves to torment you with that. He loves to beat Christians over the head with that question. He likes to just get his digs in on you with that question. But you know what? It's not a tough question. It's not difficult. In fact, I was speaking at a high school in East Mesa a few years ago at the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and they told me ahead of time he was going to show up. There was a young man. He's an atheist. He always comes apparently to challenge the speaker, and that was the reason he showed up that day. And so I had given not this talk, but a different talk on the evidence from the sciences for a creator. And so at the end of my talk, he raises his hand. I said, well, what's your question? And he goes, well, if God created everything, then who created God? I said, well, that's a great question, but in order to answer your question, I'm going to ask you a similar question to kind of make sense of my answer. Is that okay? So what if I asked you a similar question? What if I said, what does algebra taste like? And he's looking at me, and I go, well, what's your answer? What does algebra taste like? And yeah, you guys are laughing because it's a crazy question. It doesn't even make sense. But think about this. Why doesn't it make sense? Well, because that question violates one of the rules of logic. It's called a category mistake. It's not difficult. So you have the category of things like math and abstract things, math, numbers, algebra, abstract things, that's category. And over here you have a category of things that have taste. And these are two separate categories, and the reason it doesn't make any sense, these categories, it's a category mistake. And so, like I explained to him, so in the similar way, it's the same logical problem with your question, because when you ask questions like, who caused this? Where did this come from? How did this begin? What created this? Those are great, great questions, but they're all in the category of things that are finite. But God's not in that category. God is in the category of that which is infinite. Two different categories. And so when you pick up finite questions and you try to drop them off over here, it's like asking, what does algebra taste like? It's a nonsense question. Well, he wasn't going to give up easily. So he goes, okay, I understand that. He said, so basically what you're saying is that God was always there. I said, yes, sir, that's what I'm saying, that God was always there. In fact, philosophers say it this way. They say that God is self-existent. That's what it means. God is self-existent. Well, he starts laughing, and he's mocking me, and he's like, that's a cop-out. You can't just say, well, God was always there, and that's a cop-out. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. You're an atheist, right? I understand that, right? He goes, yep, yes, I'm an atheist. And I said, okay, well, do you at least agree with me that the universe had a beginning? He goes, yeah, I believe that, but I don't believe in God. And I said, no, I understand that. I said, but you agree with me there was a time that the universe did not even exist? You agree with me that space, time, matter, that the universe had a beginning? Do you agree with that? And he goes, yeah, I know that. But he said, but I don't believe in God. And I said, I understand that. But that's not my point. My point is this. If you're going to deny God's existence, if you're going to be an atheist, then by faith, you have to believe that what was there before the universe began, what caused the universe, what caused the Big Bang, what was there before the Big Bang was some form of matter or mass energy or a particle that never, ever, ever had a beginning. And you have to believe by faith that nothing made this particle, nothing caused this particle, it didn't come from anywhere, it was just always there. So I'm not sure why you're mocking me when I say that God was always there, because you apparently believe the same thing about this particle. He said, okay, whatever, you can believe what you want, and I'll believe what I want, because we'll never know. And I said, no. I'm not going to let you off that easily because you can know and you do know. I said, you do know. And I told him, all you have to do is reflect on all the things that I've presented that morning. I said, it's intuitive, it's instinctive, you know. And guys, Romans 1:20 says that this student, he knows. And it says he has no excuse. Well, guys, I hope this has been encouragement to you. And so I hope a couple things have happened this morning. I hope, number one, I hope that you realize, and this is just a very, very small sampling. As Matt said, there's a whole, so many resources out there in apologetics to help you. But this is just a small sampling so that if you had any doubt, that this just lets you know that your faith in God is not blind faith. It's not like just this leap of blind faith. It's not blind faith. It's trust, yes, but it's well-grounded in fact, in history, in science, that the Christian worldview makes sense of the laws of logic, and it makes sense of the sciences and history and everything else. And the second thing that I hope that happens, I hope that this will motivate you to really step outside of your comfort zone and to engage people in these conversations. Really, they need us to do that because we can make sense to them, and it does make, and it will make sense to them. And even, as in fact, I can send to Matt, I can send a list of great, great resources. I love to recommend that personally there are resources that I really like, that resources like Stand to Reason, they're right here in California. Stand to Reason, a great, great resource. And then there are other resources like AnswersInGenesis.org, Creation.com, Cross-Examined. Great, great resources. I was talking to one of your elders a little earlier this morning that it takes a lot of pressure off of you because in the process of studying, and you should study these resources, but even when you run across something and you go, I don't know the answer to that, just if they ask you a tough question, you pull out your phone and you say, I don't know the answer, but here's somebody that does. They've done all the research, they've done all the heavy lifting. Are you willing? Are you willing with an open mind to look, to read, to watch? So I hope that this has really encouraged you this morning.